Hi, it's me, Galen. Galen's got Parkinson's. I'm going to bore you today with a ramble about Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I find it harder to talk about Dungeons and Dragons to you than I would if we were talking about historical wargaming. Because in historical wargaming, the history sets a strict line of events and possibilities. Because Dungeons and Dragons isn't that, it's the opposite of that in a way. It means we are all right. Not only are we all right, as in correct, we're all right. Come on, you know. All of our games are different. That's good. You know, that's not a bad thing. That's a great thing. It's not a weakness of Dungeons and Dragons. The fact that Dungeons and Dragons now isn't like it was when I started in 77, 78 isn't a weakness, it's a strength. The game has survived. And surely things have to evolve. I have pictures of how I played Dungeons and Dragons very early on. I have pictures of how I played Dungeons and Dragons this week. Early on, we didn't even map. The Dungeon Master would tell us and describe to us the corridor, but we didn't even think to write it down, or we didn't bother, because the manual says so, the modules say so, right from the start. In fact, they suggest you have two people drawing independently maps, which they can then compare. We couldn't be bothered with that. And I suppose, you see, early on, our rationale was, if I am walking through a dripping dark cave, when I was fit and young and thin, I used to be a caver, a potholer. You do not cave and pothole with a pen and paper in your hand, writing everything down, because it's wet and it's cold, and some of the little dips and narrow, and sometimes you have to go underwater and bump your head till you come up the other end. Let's be real here. Now, we didn't get to the stage of dripping water on ourselves, so every now and again the DM would run in and throw a bucket of water on you and say, "You've been through a waterfall there, mate." Oh, well, okay. But we sort of wanted it to be real. We had candles burning, and so if somebody lit a torch, they could light a little candle. And if nobody lit a torch, the only candle was the Dungeon Master's. And if he was really mean, he'd blow that out as well. So we were trying to evoke the atmosphere, and we didn't know what was happening. I mean, I remember a lot of games for our players, and I'm not saying, oh, look what we did in the early days. No, this is what I did in the early days, because we were never happy with the complexities of magic. What have you learned? What can you do? What spells have you got hidden about your vestments? It's going to kill the game if you've got to keep looking them up. We used to say to magic users, you can use any spell you want. What do you want to do? And then the Dungeon Master would think, oh, he's not doing that. There's no chance you're doing that, mate. So the Dungeon Master would throw 2 secret dice and say, oh, he failed. And if you fail, you have a massive penalty on your intelligence and on your willpower, because intelligence is what enables you to cast the spell, and willpower is the power you need to cast the spell or to resist somebody else's spell. So that was hard. You didn't want to do that too often in a day. You could pick some up when you rested, if you were lucky enough to rest. And if you failed, if you fumbled, there was a fumble chart, and horrible things happened to you. But if you fell off, you changed sex, turned into a vase of flowers, talking piglet. You know how wild it got. So casting magic, although magicians magic users had huge power. Anything you could think of, you could cast that spell. But if the Dungeon Master didn't like it, it wasn't going to work. But you didn't know that. Well, he probably did. I mean, I had a game once where a chap made an entire section of a dungeon disappear. The whole section just disappeared and became nothing. Because it was full of monsters and it looked like it was going to go very horribly wrong, so they just vanished it. Horrible, stupid decision. If I'd been the Dungeon Master, that wizard would have ended up a pile of ash in some pointy boots with a hat on, smoke rings, and I would never have told him why. But I wasn't the DM, so ho hum, led to a lot of arguments, I can tell you. That wasn't wrong. Well, it was wrong. let's be fair. But within the realm of the way they were playing, it was perfectly acceptable. And I'll tell you what it did do. It meant that magic users could creatively think of things. They weren't bound by wading through books to find spells, or like today, going through the app, or going through piles of cards, or using all the technology to find what spells have I got, what can it do? Oh, hang on, stop the game, I've got to read all this now. Okay, I'm doing that. And then the Dungeon Master says, well, I'm not sure, let me read it. Then you have a big debate, and then they both get the phones out and they check it and see what he says. Or in the olden days, we'd have got the manuals, the big books, everybody would have wading through them, arguing. But the game's stopped. And you'll have gathered, if you watched any of my other videos, I don't like that. Now, I'm not advocating anything. See, it doesn't really matter what you use. I've got a module there, the Palace of the Silver Princess. I've got a game there I'm playing on my own, throwing dice to see which way I should go. I've got a game here using unpainted figures as counters. I've got a game there using painted figures. I've got furniture. I know people have said, you talk rubbish. Thank you, I know, I understand. Some people have said nice things, thank you for that. I'm not pretending to know anything. I apologise for what's happening here. I like that. You don't want to see that. And I've got in front of me a whole range of ways that I play dungeons. I like these fancy doors on little stands. Sometimes I just describe the door. Sometimes they have to map it and draw it on graph paper. Sometimes I use my lovely templates that I like. And it depends how the gamers feel. I know that my immediate family like a mixture. They like a bit of everything. And that suits me fine, and that's how we've played for 40 years. And we all understand each other, we all know the sorts of characters we are, and we all play characters that we enjoy being. My wife is usually a dwarf, and she usually gets herself into trouble being a dwarf. But we know the role, and we play the roles. So that's already done for us. We don't need anyone to tell us anymore. Some people do, they're not at that stage. There's nothing wrong with that. And however you're interpreting the game is perfectly fine. You are doing fine. You're doing a cracking job. Your game, whether it's a solo game or with your friends or at a formal group or online, is perfect if you like doing it. That's it. That's the great revelation. No one can criticise what you're enjoying doing. There's no right to. That's an outrageous thing. There is no right or wrong way of playing this game. There is only the way that you prefer. And sometimes it's okay to take ideas and hints from other people and put them into your game and see if they work. And if they don't, chuck them away. And if they do, fantastic. You know what I'm going to say now. Ta-ra, Chuck.